We are pleased to introduce Ms. Bo Zigner. Ms. Zigner is an instructional designer and manager of the Office of Distant Education at Kutztown University in Pennsylvania. Ms. Zigner earned her Master of Science in Instructional Technology from Bloomsburg University in 2001 and earned her baccalaureate degree in sociology in 1995, also from Bloomsburg University. Her presentation will provide an overview on determining time on tasks in the online environment. Specifically, this presentation will provide things to consider when developing an online course to ensure instructional time spent in the online environment equates to instructional seat time in a traditional face-to-face classroom setting. Please welcome Ms. Bo Zigner.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much to HETS and the board members for asking me to join you today. I'm very honored and happy to be here to talk to you and open the virtual best practices session for HETS. The topic I'll be talking to you about today is equivalency. Oops. So what I'll be talking about in this equivalency session is we're going to talk a little bit about the history of where the whole concept of equivalency came from. I'll cover a little bit about what our state of Pennsylvania considers what is and what is not equivalent. Some examples of equivalent activities in the online classroom versus the virtual classroom. And finally, I'll conclude with some general statements and hopefully have time for some questions. So on to the history. Kutztown University is part of the state system of higher education in Pennsylvania. So for our purposes today, everything I'm going to be telling you is pertinent specifically to our state of Pennsylvania. So please keep that in mind as I continue on. Every one of us in this room know better than anybody that with the adoption and the increasing creativity of our faculty members and the way our institutions are moving, there has been an increasing use of distance education, teaching online, and the use of online technologies. There's so much out there. Well, our Pennsylvania Department of Education has implemented, or in 2008, they implemented a new policy, and that basically says, or it was called the Curricular Credit Policy to ensure the quality of transferability. Now this policy came out as a result of those courses who were being taught in a different mode of instruction. So it could be online, blended or hybrid version of a course, even the accelerated formats of programs that are being offered these days for the working adult or for the non-traditional student, weekend courses. There are all kinds of formats out there right now that are available. With the increasing adoption of these various modes of instruction, the Department of Education was getting a little concerned about really ensuring the quality of those courses and the transferability from the face-to-face environment to the virtual environment. Part of this policy also outlines and allows for each of the universities to work together to determine on their own the online or out-of-classroom activities that are equivalent in their eyes to classroom instruction. So while there are broad guidelines out there, which we'll take a look at, each university could certainly be doing it a little bit differently. So as per the policy, what is the equivalent? What is equivalent when you talk about teaching in the classroom and then taking it to an online environment? This policy, and I'm quoting out of this policy, to identify the high-quality curricular content, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically it sums up that these activities or these guidelines that you should be considering would be best online as well as face-to-face. So the first one here is your course should obviously be directly related to the objectives of that course or program. Just like in a face-to-face classroom, you're there to teach something, and you want to ensure that your students are walking away with those objectives met. Same thing in the online or virtual environment. Also, it would best be measurable for grading purposes. Instructors should have direct oversight or supervision of teaching that course. So in other words, in the classroom, you're not necessarily going to just put up a PowerPoint and walk out of the room for the hour that you're in there. Same thing with the online or even a blended environment. What this is saying is that it shouldn't be necessarily a course that you just put up there and the students walk themselves through. To maintain that quality and to maintain that rigor of instructional credit and instructional course, there needs to be a faculty member or an expert to guide those students through the course materials. And finally, in some form, be equivalent of an activity conducted in the classroom. So you really are trying to create, establish, maintain the same sense of environment that you might feel in the classroom setting and translate that into the online environment. In the classroom, you try to encourage discussion, you try to encourage building community and interaction peer-to-peer, specifically peer to instructor, specifically instructor to, and also specifically student to the material that you are teaching them. So again, we really want to try to reflect that as well in the virtual environment. Now on the flip side, what is not equivalent? The equivalent of content should not be homework assignments. Students aren't doing homework assignments when they're sitting in front of you in the classroom setting. And also time spent or calculation based on the amount of time the student spends accomplishing a task. What that really means is, you're not going to assign a homework assignment and have them sit in the classroom and do it. You don't necessarily assign reading assignments or articles to have been read prior to class. You don't hand them out in class and expect that the students are going to read them during your class time. These are all activities that really occur outside of the classroom and support that in-classroom teaching and learning process, and really should enhance what you're trying to achieve in the classroom setting. So what I did was I came up with a little chart that will help you hopefully to understand how you might want to start thinking about framing your instruction, particularly when you're used to teaching in the classroom setting. It's a much more dynamic environment. You have the students in front of you. You can encourage them to answer your questions. You can encourage them to get up and participate, without them kind of in a virtual world, and you don't have them right in front of you. So if you look on your left, you're going to see the in-class activity. Now, these are just broad, general statements. These are things that I felt that were very commonly used or most commonly used in the in-class environment, which I thought would be useful for you to kind of see where that equivalent activity would come into play. So the majority of classrooms do some sort of, or operate on a lecture. They could be lecture, they could be demonstrations. Many times perhaps you have a guest speaker invited into the classroom. You evaluate in the classroom, so quizzes and tests also occur during class time. If we look to the right there, the equivalent online activity then could be things like pre-recorded lectures for students to review or view. There are synchronous, real-time tools to do this, so you could actually schedule a lecture with your students in a virtual classroom environment. At Kutztown University, we're still using WIMBA classrooms, so that is a really nice way for instructors to still keep that personal touch with their students and be able to build off of probably a little bit more complicated concepts perhaps. Perhaps you consider using a synchronous tool like a virtual classroom to discuss and work through some of the more difficult concepts. the pre-recorded lectures could be available for the students for maybe the lower level learning concepts to reach those lower lying fruit in regards of objectives. The other piece of the online activity, or the equivalent of this online activity, is with the adoption of these learning management systems. We have Blackboard, that's huge. We have Desire to Learn, which is what we use at Kutztown University. With these tools in place and so available to our faculty, it's much more welcoming for the faculty to be able to do these things and to be able to experiment with some of the online tools and the collaboration tools that are available within these learning management systems. I'm sure you guys, everybody sitting in here, your universities also utilize some sort of content or learning management system as well. The second activity that I chose to add here are discussions. In the classroom, you really want to spark that discussion. You really want to work with your students to work through a concept. Same idea in the online environment. You have synchronous and asynchronous tools to be able to do that. I touched a little bit just a minute ago about the learning management system, the virtual environment, where you have that synchronous capability of having a virtual classroom at your fingertips. In the learning management system, if you choose to focus on asynchronous tools, you have discussion topics, you have discussion boards, all available to the students to interact not just with you as the instructor, but also with each other. So there's a lot of different approaches and instructional strategies that can be used to kind of encourage and spark that interaction and build that community that you would have otherwise built in the face-to-face environment. And finally, the third in-class activity I chose to identify was group projects or student presentations. Again, the online collaboration tools that are available both synchronously and asynchronously really provide opportunities for the students and the instructors to work together. And it's not impossible. There are, at least at Kutztown, there are many, many faculty members using collaborative wikis for small group projects where the students come together and build a wiki on a specific topic. So they're constantly going back and forth. They're constantly interacting and collaborating and editing. And it's a really neat thing to see. It's a really neat thing to watch kind of build as the faculty member. So finally, we have this graphic up here. I threw this graphic up here because I've been talking about so many online technologies and the adoption of all of these creative things going on. You have the internet at your fingertips when you teach in the virtual environment. So, Yahoo, WordPress, YouTube, even tweeting is really an adopted practice that you can continue your students discussing a topic and really engaging in a specific topic. In the online environment, I encourage you to experiment with these things. Our students are aware and familiar of these tools, particularly like the Twitter and even WordPress, Google Apps anymore. Our students are coming with us with iPads and cell phones, and the technology is changing so rapidly that your options are pretty limitless when you come to the online environment. Unfortunately, equivalency is not an exact science, but every one of us in this room, I think, have a vested interest in our students and in education, and we all want to maintain the integrity and rigor of our academic courses, which really is the bottom line of where this whole concept of equivalency came from, and the policy of the Pennsylvania State Department of Education and their implementation in 2008. Thank you.
We understand the factors that promote college success, the impact of approaches that truly facilitate success and quality, the secret to a solid teaching process for the Hispanic learner, and the key role of technology to make this happen. Hence, an opportunity to propose, find, and integrate innovative technology solutions to education. We go beyond higher education. We strive for a higher vision. Visit us at www.hets.org. Hets Consortium.